Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing today?
Hi, Ryan.
Doing
Great.
well.
Good. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us here today. My name is Ryan Pecca with Arctic Wolf. Today, what we're planning to do is walk through a quick presentation, kind of discussing the cybersecurity landscape and how that really relates to compliances. I know a lot of you may have you're facing compliance issues that you are looking to use your trusted cybersecurity partner and Accorian to help navigate that ever-changing landscape. Accorian has partnered with Arctic Wolf. We are a cybersecurity company based out of Minnesota here, really to help expedite that and really accelerate their cybersecurity stack. So what we have today is we've pulled together a presentation kind of detailing, looking at that cybersecurity landscape and looking at some of the compliance challenges you may face, how partnering with Accorian can help you navigate those uncertain seas and kind of that ever-changing landscape, and how working alongside Accorian and both Arctic Wolf, we can really get to those outcomes, at a much quicker pace and really make sure that we are compliant throughout the life cycle, and meeting those frameworks consistently. For today's conversation, we'll have our two trusted panelists. We'll have Om Hazela from Accorian. Om has been in the cybersecurity industry for over 25 years, working alongside organizations like yourself, being a trusted consulting leader, has deep expertise in governance, risk, compliance. So really being able to help you navigate those compliance frameworks. Any questions you may have, please reach out to Om, as Om will be able to help assist there. Alongside Om speaking today, we'll also have Brian Franzen. Brian is a senior sales engineer here at Arctic Wolf, working alongside organizations like Accorian to help assist their customers on that ever-changing landscape, answering any questions they have about their current cybersecurity landscape, and really being that giving that consultative approach to those customers, and really helping them understand where their gaps may be as far as where they're at today and how they can achieve that compliancy with that framework that they're looking to achieve. For today's conversation, we'll be focused on two main subjects here. First, we'll be diving into compliance, understanding that compliance landscape, understanding how that is an ever-changing, constant, ever-evolving challenge with those frameworks changing, understanding some of those frameworks. So we'll dive into some of those frameworks more specifically, PCI, HIPAA, etc. Really, how partnering with Accorian and Arctic Wolf, how we can help bridge that gap to make sure that we are, putting in detection and response tools that we can maintain those core controls. Beyond that, being able to map those compliance, having those design or those being ready for those compliance frameworks and having some of those pre-authorizations in place. And then from there, we'll shift to that conversation more about security operations. So current methods out there in the marketplace as far as how we can achieve these frameworks, how Arctic Wolf can be that partner assisting you meeting those requirements and assisting you with supplying documentation to satisfy those audits. And then from there, some of the tools that Arctic Wolf also has, some of our GRC tooling as far as our cyber resilience assessment, and then just an overall overview of our Arctic Wolf security operations. And then we'll also kind of dive into a case study. And then at the very end of the call, we'll kind of round this out with some Q&A. So please, if you do have any questions, please drop that in the chat and we'll address those at the end here. But without further ado, I'll pass this over to Om to really speak about compliance here today.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Hello, everyone. I am Om, and I hold a unique role, like a dual role at Accorian. So I serve as a CISO, like Ryan has already mentioned. So I'm responsible for protecting our own house, and I'm also VP of Compliance Services. So where I advise global services to the clients and help them to achieve their GRC journey. Okay. So now let's look at the reality of the landscape where we are operating today, right? So at Accorian, we work with hundreds of organizations to get them audit ready for frameworks like SOC 2, ISO 27K, High Trust, and PCI DSS, HIPAA, and so on. Okay. So what we are seeing is a fundamental shift. So compliance is no longer a point in time event, right? So you can't just get compliant for your audit in October and then forget about it till next year. That is not going to happen at all, right? So the demand today is for the continuous compliance, and this creates a major challenge. So you can see there are a couple of challenges. I've just highlighted these three. We'll talk about it. So first one, most important, is the always on requirement. So what is happening these days? The auditors, even the lot of customers, they now expect the proof that is security controls are active 24 by 7. It is not just during those business hours. It has to be always on. The detection should be there. It should be immediately responded so that the risk is reduced. So the 24/7 threat hunting is the play of the day. Okay, that is one. Second challenge, what I can see, I'll come back to the continuous demand, the high cost and effort. So if we look at the operational impact, the manual collection of evidence is creating a significant bottleneck, right? So what's happening these days, most of the organization, they are collecting the evidence manually. Okay, so that is slow also and costly in terms of, in case you have a resource who can manage the security, still that guy is working and collecting the evidence. Okay, so that, so and he's not focusing on the main security initiatives, so that is a misalignment, right? So that comes to the high cost and effort. The next and the most important is the continuous demand. So if we see the audit cycle, that has become a constant cycle. So every year, any organization, they have to go for, if they are the ISO SOC 2, every year they have to go for the ISO SOC 2, risk assessment, pen testing, everything they have to do. But we also know that so many vulnerabilities, the new vulnerabilities they appear daily, right? Even if you change a single configuration into your environment, the complete posture changes. Okay, so modern frameworks demand that you don't just have a firewall, but you are also monitoring it continuously for any changes, for any threats. This is why a real-time monitoring is imperative, right? So, however, just to bridge the gap between knowing what to do and executing 24/7, we partner with Article, Ryan has already mentioned. While Accorian handles strategy and readiness, right? Article provides the operational engine. So what happens? Their security operation cloud, it monitors the environment around the clock, automatically capture the logs, and whatever evidences we need, it is provided through the portal. So if you see at Accorian, we design the compliance framework, right? And Arctic Wolf provide the engine that runs 24/7. So here we turn this 24/7 security challenge into the 24/7 competitive advantage. So this is a high level. I told you about the challenges which any compliance frameworks, they ask for it, and all organizations have to meet these requirements. Okay, can we go to the next one, Ryan? Great. So now I'll just shift the gears and want to talk about the compliance frameworks. Like I was mentioning, all those frameworks we are implementing. I'll just give you the quick overview and also talk about particular control of those framework, right? So here, if in the matrix, if you see, we see the overlap. Okay, so the first is framework, then action, and the article outcome categories which they support. So whether it is SOC 2, which requires your security event anomalies, whether it is HIPAA that demands info security system activity review like a logging monitoring, the solution generally remains same. Okay, so if you notice the pattern across ISO 27K, CMMC, PCI DSS, they all demand continuous monitoring and incident response. Okay, so what article creates it, they collect the evidence once, and it can use it for the multiple framework. Okay, let's take an example of SOC 2, which is coming directly into my mind. uh, so in the SOC 2, there is a CC 7.2, which is nothing but your the logging and monitoring control, okay, which is the security TSC, where the requirement is to that all companies, they have to ensure that they are not just gathering the data, but actively monitoring and analyzing the suspicious activity. So in this case, what exactly article does, they satisfy by providing the human expertise. Okay, so that they can distinguish between the false positive or also between the true anomaly, which is correct. Okay, and apart from this, it gives the audit evidence, which is nothing but an actual analysis. Which is happening over 24/7. So any auditor, if is asking about the okay, you have the logs of the event, yes, we have, but do you have the analysis of those events? Yes or no? So if you have that, the implementation already in place of 24/7, then you will have it, right? So now let's go to the other compliance framework. I'll just touch base on the PCI first, right? So PCI, if you see, these are the objectives on the left side. On the center, if you see the requirement. So what happens? PCI, like for the car data environment, those merchants and service provider, if they have the cardholder data, that is their the top priority, right? And they have to meet all the PCI requirement without any exception. Otherwise, it's very difficult to have the compliance, continuous compliant on the PCI standard. So currently in the PCI version 4.0.1, these are the requirements which generally can be met by the Arctic Wolf MDR solution. So if you see, I'll talk about the controls, which are very important, like firewall configuration. If there are any change in the firewall configuration, it has to be monitored, correct? If there is a data movement or data is read or at rest or in the motion, or somebody is trying to access the data from the malicious IP, that also has to be tracked and monitored. Vulnerability scans has to be done. Any login activity has to be monitored, right? Network traffic has to be monitored, and those kind of a thing. So I'll give you one example, which recently I came across in one of the assessment. There is a control requirement 10, I would say, that is a login and monitoring in PCI DSS. So the control is 10.4.1, where it says the automated audit log reviews. Okay, what it mandates the organization to perform the automated reviews of audit logs. Okay, it is no longer you cannot rely on the periodic, the old fashioned manual spot checks. That is not going to happen for any security event. You have to have the automated log, otherwise you will fail this control, right? So for the CD environment, what Arctic will automate? They automates its review entirely. Okay, so it is not only the automation, they also flag it with the exception and immediately that ensure that you are not failing that particular control and you are compliant throughout the year and also between the audits. So that is on the PCI. Let's go to the next one. I want to talk about on the HIPAA side, right? So if you see on the screen, there are a few sections which we have highlighted, and these are the requirement on the center where multiple, you can see the detailed information, access management, login monitoring, disaster recovery plan, access control, and standard documentation requirements all are met by the Arctic Wolf solution. So I'll just take an example of a HIPAA. So HIPAA, obviously, everybody is aware in the health sector. If your EPHI is compromised, then you're gone, right? So what happens? So the requirement of HIPAA mandates that only authorized person should access the EPHI. For that, you have to continuously monitor the access list. Okay, you should also have the organization should also have the technical procedure which can just control, monitor, and verify who all have access to, who access have been revoked, those were not required access have been revoked, or not, those kind of a thing. So what the Arctic Wolf monitors, they monitors the identity providers. So for example, like you have a Azure AD or you have an Okta. Okay, so immediately the unauthorized logins will be flagged. That is one. Second, if there is a dormant accounts, the accounts are not being used, it is not, nobody is following and it's long pending, that has to be identified. It will be identified by them. That is one. Second. Third is if there is an excessive permission which is given to the particular account, that will also be flagged. So on the access control side, you're getting all the details of a particular person. If he is authorized to access, then the details is there. Else, if the account is suppose hijacked to access the PHI, so the articles will automatically contain and identify, stop the breach before the data is exploited. It's not that the post. So it is a proactive approach. Okay. So the data which is there at the EPHI, if the unauthorized person is accessing the person will be, the access will be immediately identified, it will be stopped, and the data will not be exfiltrated. So it is a savior. That is on the HIPAA. Now I want to talk about something on the CMMC. Can we do the next one? Yeah, thanks. Okay, so CMMC basically it is for the manufacturing compliance checklist. You can see on the screen where these are the sections, or these are the requirements are generally captured by the control list, and also the Arctic Wolf helps to achieve these requirements. So let's take an example, maybe section 3.14, where the system and information integrity. Okay, so this control requires the organization to identify, okay, report, and also correct any system flaws in a timely manner. There's a time limit also, right? So this applies to if suppose organization is doing any software or any firmware vulnerabilities across the system that touches or uses the CUI, basically your controlled unclassified information. In that case, it has to be identified. So this is about the vulnerability management. So the value here is, so what article does, they prioritize the vulnerabilities. And so the vulnerability, there's a thing like you can identify vulnerability which is even low also, correct? So they identify the vulnerability based on the priorities, based on the risk, and give a score. It is not the completely dumping all the vulnerabilities and the findings, and it gives you the action plan, and also it give the remediation and recommendation for the timely correction, so that if an auditor is coming and asking you, okay, do you have this issue in the past or any incident happened, if it had happened, right, if the vulnerability was found, how it was fixed, what was the time taken, those details you can always capture with the help of the AW solution. And also you can showcase the priority, like high risk issues were the address first, then the medium and the low, and also the score for these risk areas. So this is on the CMMC. So I thought I'll cover all those frameworks so that the audience is aware that if there is a requirement of 24 by 7 compliance and monitoring, and these are the control requirements. If you're facing a difficulty, or if you think that's what is the solution which we can go for, these are the couple of options, and these are the controls and the requirement which can be met by the article solution. Thanks. Ryan, can we go to the next one? All right, great. So I want to touch base on one of the use case of the article for MDR solution, where this is the PCI DSS, which is again a CD environment, and this is a nightmare for any CISO if this happens. Okay, so an attack happens when in the for the critical payment infrastructure in the CD environment, you call it, after hour, when the team is offline. Okay, so in this specific case, we saw repeated login attempts targeting to some payment processing server, for example. Okay, so it was not just a brute force attack. It stemmed from some misconfiguration that violated your PCI access control requirements. Okay, so like PCI also mandates, if there is a because of the misconfiguration, you are supposed to correct that immediately in some particular time duration. Okay, so what happened in the article, since because we had the 24 by 7 article MDR monitoring solution, this was not found the next day. It was immediately blocked, or the damage was it was hold. It was flagged, and anomaly was immediately detected. So on the response side, how MDR did it? The account was disabled. So there are three issues. Okay, first was the failed login outside from this thing. So account was disabled. That is one. Second, the firewall rules were corrected just to block the source, so that the person or any other entity cannot enter. That is second. Third, the logging gap was also fixed. Right. So what is the outcome? So from the compliance standpoint, this is a win. Okay. We didn't just stop a hacker, we preserved our compliance status. So if that breach would have occurred, so the organization would have been facing a failed report on compliance, which is the big thing, potential fines and maybe a massive trust issues. Okay. So this proves that if we have a 24 by 7 monitoring solution, it is not just a security tool, right? It is sort of, I would say, a security or an insurance policy for your compliance program. So here in the example, you see how MDR has caught things which could have been worst in a real time, okay, and how it responded. So suppose when the auditor is coming and asking me this something happened, you always have a report and the corrective actions and the responses at the end with the detailed report, right? That is one on the use case of the article MDR solution. Now let's go to the next one. I want to talk about on the uh, core controls. So I would recommend, like, these are the three core controls which are very important for any organization to implement. If you see any framework, you talk about SOC 2, PCI, ISO, HIPAA, the auditor's first question is, show me the logs, right? So so what Artable solution generally in these three controls, if you have that solution in place, it does not just collect the data. Okay, it centralizes it from the endpoints, right? Servers and cloud into a single source of truth. Okay, so this ensures that you're not only you're not only having the one point in time or one particular asset of an organization, logs of the particular asset, you are continuously monitoring your all the assets across the board in the complete environment and without any manual overhead. Because manually, obviously, you can do, but it is not efficient or effective. It might be challenging, it might be overwhelming to review so many logs created in a particular day, right? And it is very difficult to identify any anomalies if it is there. Okay, that is one. Second is the 24 by 7 incident detection and response. So what happens if there's any incident? Okay, so there is a team at Arctic Wolf, which is the CST team, and it's a human-led team. Immediately, as required by the all the modern frameworks, there has to be a human intervention. Okay, there's a human in the loop. Already we are talking about that. And it proves that we have eyes on a glass 24 by 7 by 365. Okay, those guys are working and seeing is there any incident happen. If they detect the incident, immediately it is responded. Okay, so what is happening here? Uh, Crucially, this reduces your the dwell time. Okay, so here to the auditor, if I talk about the compliance, you're not showing only that you have the incident response plan, right? We are also generating some operational evidence which can showcase your plan was effective and active. That is the beauty. Okay, that's second. Third is the continuous vulnerability management. So what happening? So the Article solution continuously monitor the misconfigurations in the real time, the complete cloud environment, all the assets. So you have any vulnerability found before the audit is giving you one of the finding. Okay, that is not good. Okay, so this moves us from the point in time compliance to the continuous compliance. So more or less, you are the audit ready if you have these core controls already in place with the help of the Article solution. All right. Can we go to the next one, Rand? So when I talk about the compliance readiness, so it is by design. So if you see, you have the like I talked about and spoken in the previous slide, you have the CST team that acts as a translator. Okay, it will give you if suppose something has happened, it will convert the raw security events into your audit ready documentation, which can always you can produce it to the auditor. That is one. Second, you already have the customized dashboard with your audit ready reporting where if they ask anything about the access monitoring, if they ask anything about the vulnerability management, if they ask about anything the incident logs, everything is prepared in the customized. You can always produce the report to the auditor. That is second. Third, you can always showcase to auditor that it is not the reactive approach. The compliance is proactive, and we are not only working in on the day when there is an audit. It is so we have it was organization has moved from the stressful annual hurdle into a continuous verifiable daily outcome. So daily you are monitoring your compliance status. Daily you are monitoring your the status of the environment, your incident response, vulnerability management, your logs. Everything is monitored and tracked daily. So this is how the organization can be a compliance ready by design. I'll take a pause and I'll hand over to Brian for the next slide.
Excellent. Well, thank you. One, appreciate everyone taking time out of their busy day to join us today. Just quick context or background surrounding myself. While I am a senior sales engineer here at Arctic Wolf, before that, I was an infrastructure IT resource. So very much like everyone here, had some hand in making sure that from an operational perspective and a security perspective, that we're buttoned up across the board. So to that end, I've used many different technologies in the past. I want to highlight just some observations that I've seen across the various, we'll say, 4 odd years of conversations I've had with businesses that are looking to enhance their cybersecurity. But the first thing that we'll typically hear during a lot of these conversations is general acronym confusion. There's this alphabet soup effect going on in security right now, where everything needs to be a short 3 to 4 letter acronym, and it's causing issues between technical stakeholders who understand the value and why it needs to be implemented, and we'll say people that control the purse strings and want to understand how they can minimize risk to their business. But comparing apples to apples has been a challenge, and I think to some degree that's by design. So walking through some of those acronyms, I'll start at the top. SIM, SIEM, there's, I guess, 2 common ways to pronounce either way. The idea here is you want to aggregate any logs you have. This could be full logging from your network, your on-prem environments, your cloud, authentication, MFA, or it can be more limited in scope. Typically, when folks are looking to implement a solution like that, it's almost entirely for a compliance-driven reason, right? As Ohm noted, auditors are looking for evidence of how you're meeting or exceeding controls within any given framework. A SIM checks that box by saying, we have all the logs here and we can present them. So they are, in theory, being monitored. However, the experience that smaller to mid-sized businesses will have is that security is largely a 24/7 operation. You can't just aggregate all the logs from overnight and then the following morning look through and see if there's security incidents. Threat actors typically like to operate when folks are not paying attention. So what we found is that while SIM is typically attractive up front, usually going to be lower barrier to entry. It requires a lot of expertise and tuning to make sure not only are you getting the visibility you're looking for, but then something is actually being done with those logs. So spending time to create detections and rule sets. So if we see someone log in from North America 1 minute and the next minute they're in Australia, by default, a SIM won't have any detection based there. You'd have to effectively build out the logic to it. The other piece we'll note is that SIM typically, if you're going to provide 24/7 monitoring with it, you need anywhere from probably 5 to 7 resources to do that. And if any resource were to leave the company or move positions internally at any given point, you lose a lot of that expertise. So SIM, while it can be attractive for, I think, very, very large organizations that have 40, 50, 60 plus people on their security team, typically operating it in a smaller scale can be a challenge. EDR, I guess formerly known as antivirus or next-gen antivirus. The idea here, endpoint detection and response. These are going to be pieces of software that run on your endpoints, on your servers, EC2 instances, you name it, and they're looking for signs of malicious activity. Usually these will have two components. Endpoint protection, which is, hey, this file's trying to execute. Here is the hash associated with it. Do you want to allow this to run or do you want to block it? That is one component. The other, which a lot of the major EDR players are getting into, would be more around behavioral. So if somebody were to, let's say there's a file hash the world has never seen before, and before any tool can block it, it tries to kick off a PowerShell command. It is effectively an EDR solution. We'll be looking for common utilities that are just native to an operating system to be invoked. And if they are, that would typically shut it down, provided it's been configured well. But very much focused on endpoints. So if you're talking cloud, think like Office 365, Google Workspace, email, usually not a realm that it would operate in. Now, managed detection response, MDR and XDR, there's going to be a little bit of overlap there. XDR, in general, the idea is extended detection and response. This is more, I guess, of an idea that would be applied to technology. So you think maybe we've seen firewalls, for example, that typically do network blocking, right? Some firewalls will also make calls to local DNS or DHCP servers to get more insight to see if something's happening. So the extended piece is a more traditional siloed piece of technology reaching out to a very, a different aspect of your cybersecurity to get more context. So by communicating with itself, it can determine to a higher degree of certainty when an event is happening. Managed detection response kind of puts all that together. So it's right there in the first letter there, manage. You would typically have a third-party SOC, whether it's Arctic Wolf or another group that would be responsible for pulling in all your logs in a SIM-like capacity, looking through them in real time to determine what is true business behavior and what is potentially associated with threat actor activity, having a group that will stop any sort of threat in its place and either do the remediation entirely or potentially work with a customer to do so. But all of that being said, these all kind of work towards security and compliance in one way or another. I think at the top, that's going to be the most compliance-driven piece, or at the bottom, you're going to get full security operations. In fact, actually, Ryan, could you advance the slide, please? With that being said, that's kind of Arctic Wolf's model. So for those unaware, we were founded in 2012 with the grand idea of being the security operations vendor. That's not to say we wanted to have the best tool in the world. We wanted to say, you know what, you've got these great firewalls, you've got these great endpoint tools or DNS monitors or MFA, whatever it is. We realize that it's not that tools are not doing their job, but there's somewhat of an effectiveness gap, right? And organizations are largely in the time I've been here, spending usually anywhere from 2 to 5% increased spend in cybersecurity, but cybersecurity reported damages, ransomware, and business email compromise is vastly outpacing that at like 20-25% every year. With that being the case, we said we don't think it's the tools that are the problem here. It's that they're not being utilized to their full extent. So looking at the left and moving to the right, the idea is to have this level of cyber maturity and get to the spot where you can say, I am fully compliant with this framework. You start by having tools in place. After that, you'd want where you see perimeter, you're going to want a more fleshed out, defined environment where if a threat actor were to, try to reach out to your environment, you have multiple layers of defense. It's not just authentication at that point, it's bypassing a larger control. Defense in depth kind of gets into that XDR approach to some degree. Firewalls, endpoint tools especially have slowly, I think, scope creep beyond what they were doing 10, 15 years ago. And now they will have their hands in like DLP or file integrity monitoring or just web filtering. These areas of cybersecurity that were famously kind of more independent and siloed, and you purchase a point solution. Now we're seeing the platformization of security, and a lot of these tools are starting to offer more than what they've typically been expected to. Moving to that gap there, the idea here is organizations can have all the tools in the world, but if you're not taking advantage of every single control there, that's back to that operational gap. So what we want to do is provide the concierge security team that Om referred to earlier. These would be 3 engineers that we assign out to our customers based on industry vertical. So if you are going for CMMC compliance, if you are pursuing ISO accreditation, these things we want to align you with 3 engineers that will specifically talk you through the process of saying, here's where you're at today. Here's what needs to happen to make sure you're not getting a slap on the wrist come your next audit. And then finally, of course, where we all want to be, where we can go on vacation for 3/4 of the year and everything's fine. It's true business resilience. It's knowing that you have trust because you have a true service monitoring your environment and you have done everything as requested for compliance requirements to make sure you can continue to bid on contracts. Next slide, please, Ryan. So I'll go through these next two fairly quickly, as I know I touched on a good bit of it already. Managed EDR is not the same as managed detection and response. So going back to managed EDR, that is typically endpoint focused only. So think your user devices and your servers. Managed implies that there's a third party taking care of it for you. So instead of a new file popping up in your environment, someone clicked on an email and your IT team saying, do we want to allow this or deny it? You would have a third party making that call instantly. It's still going to be very much endpoint focused. So there's going to be some level of, service, but largely it's not going to be the silver bullet to protect your environment because business email compromise, at least if you talk to our incident response team, is the number one thing we see. So next slide, please. That being the case, what we'll often hear too is like, okay, SIM, so you as an MDR, you're just pulling all the logs together and you're responding. Well, we can do that, but largely, again, it comes down to expertise. If you don't have a large shop that's willing to raise their hand and work 24/7 overnights, you quite simply are not getting the same value. It's very easy to say, okay, well, this might be coming in under a fraction of this MDR service, but I'd almost liken it to like lawn care. You could buy a very cheap lawnmower, or you can buy a lawn care service that will do everything for you. They're both two ways of treating the same problem, but if you're not putting manpower behind the SIM, you quite frankly will not get a lot of value out of it. Next slide, please. So with that, I won't spend too long here as I know this is a relatively dense slide, but the idea with the Arctic Wolf approach is we're not here to displace anybody from an IT or security perspective. We work alongside them. So I specifically have customers where they have a single person working in IT, and then I've also spoken with some that have, upwards of like 15, 20 that are all kind of putting their hands in the pot and have their own little lanes they operate in. Largely, Arctic Wolf would either way, we would work to protect that environment. We'd pull in every single log. So like a SIM solution will typically charge on events per second or log volume. So if you send them 10 gigs of log one day and let's say 20,000 the next, you're probably going to see an uptick, whether you're providing the storage yourself or a group like Microsoft or AWS, there will be a bill associated with it. With Arctic Wolf, not the case. Send us every log you potentially have because one, it makes our SOC teams more effective, but also from a compliance standpoint, you can attest that you have every secure relevant log retained for as long as you're looking for it. Usually 12 months is what a lot of people speaking with or speaking through the auditing process would look for. But just know we also provide network monitoring. Haven't really talked about that. Hopefully, if you have physical locations, you have firewalls, what we can do with the sensor is augment that. So we would look at all north-south traffic. We'd also pull in your logs, and then we'd work with you to highlight gaps that could potentially be addressed there. Next slide, please. So with reporting, this is typically something that is valuable, I guess, from a compliance standpoint, especially, but also from security, right? If you are an IT professional and you said, I love this, this is exactly what I want. However, I'm not the one that controls the budget. I need to convey this to maybe a less technical resource, that the ROI on this sort of investment is worth it. So just know that if you were to operate, say, a SIM tool, you would typically have every bell and whistle in front of you to make your own reports. We do that for you as a provider. So the idea here is that if there's a compliance requirement, if they're saying we want to know how you're meeting or exceeding the requirements of, say, a SOC 2 Type 2 audit, we will not only generate those reports, we'll even join calls with you and your auditor to fast track that conversation. But if you also just want to show that, hey, the Arctic Wolf team or the SOC provider I have has performed this number of investigations into environment, and then 10% of them, 5%, whatever it is, we talked about hardening these controls, we can effectively show off that value. So it's not just a no news is good news, as if you're getting into a situation like that, sometimes it's difficult to tell if you're getting value out of what you're paying for. But the last thing to kind of tie it all together, Ryan, if you could advance one more, please, would be tied to the security journey. So this isn't just us providing a laundry list of best practice. We, as a SOC vendor, our reputation is tied to our customers, right? As you can imagine, any security shop, if their customer were to get breached, it would look bad for them. It'd be bad for everybody, right? So what we like to do as an organization is provide ongoing consulting. Now, this is fully included, and we do it because we'd rather work with an organization that has maybe gone through some of these homework exercises, if you will, rather than one that just wants to be fully, entirely removed from security. That's not to say we can't work with a partner to make recommendations and kind of break it down to maybe an annual or quarterly project you'd like, but just know these sorts of reviews are what separate typically an MDR provider from a tool, right? Having a group that you can trust, work with regularly, they understand your controls, and we're constantly iterating to make sure that the odds of you being woken up in the middle of the night have been minimized. But I think I have one more slide here, Ryan, if you don't mind hopping to the last one. The cyber resilience assessment, this is something we include with all of our tools, and quite simply, it's a governance, risk, and compliance tool, or GRC. So if you have a compliance framework that you're trying to adhere to and you want to know how broadly these policies are enforced, I think you can hop to build the next one out as well, Ryan. What you would see is a list effectively of here's what I have for endpoint. This is what I have for firewall or multi-factor authentication or backups. What we want to do here is help you identify gaps so that you can help convey to the powers that be above why certain things need to be prioritized in the future. As a vendor, we're not about to say you need to go buy this, that, and the other. Oftentimes, it's just a really simple policy change to make sure you're falling in line with things like ISO, SOC, CMMC, or any of the other big compliance frameworks. So just know if you don't have a GRC tool today, would very much recommend one, not so that you have something to fill out, but if you want to, again, try to convey to people that are less technical why these things need to be done, what sort of risk your organization has, and stacking it up to other industries like yours, something like this would kind of fast track that conversation and maybe help, we'll say, talk some sense into people that maybe don't live and breathe security like a lot of people on this call do. But I think that's all I have. We can pass it back over to Om here.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Okay, so I want to finish today by showing you what this actually looks like in practice. So this is about a major law firm in Canada, right? So now you can imagine, like, for a law firm, their entire business is built on trust and protecting the sensitive client data, and they are the prime target for hackers, right? So earlier, the challenge was, before the article solution was not there, so the challenge was the fragmented visibility. Like, they had plenty of tools, but none of them talked to each other. Okay, it was a sort of a mess of different screens and vendors. Okay, nothing was in concrete. That is one. Second, they didn't have a visibility at 24/7 on anything. Like they simply could not monitor their environment around the clock. If suppose an attack happened in the night, they will get to know the next morning only. Right, that is one. Second, the next thing is the personal shortage. So they didn't have enough people to handle the amount of risk, the vulnerabilities, and the incident planning. So that is another challenge. And so, if you see with these, it was the high stakes issues. Like they had to meet strict compliance standard and just to keep their clients, which was not happening. So, what happened later then when Arctic was 24/7 MDR solution was implemented? So, they had eyes on a glass. So, they instantly gained 24/7 monitoring through the MDR services of Arctic Wolf. That is one. Secondly, they moved from proactive to the reactive. Okay, reactive to proactive. Sorry, with the managers. So the team was they were able to manage the risk. They were also started fixing vulnerabilities before they could be exploited. So everything was monitored. The vulnerabilities got fixed. They started finding all the issues which was happening. Incident response immediately. It was active and effective. So those things were already there. And also they on the expert support, they didn't just get the software tool from them. They also got the CST team, which was a dedicated incident response retrainer, right? So at the end, they also had, like Brian was mentioning, you're showcasing the complete dashboard, not only for the compliance purpose, but also for the security guys also. They had the consolidated uh, view of all that noise into one clear view, which is streamlined their complete the entire process. So the client ended up describing that Arctic Wolf as one of their cybersecurity Swiss Army knife. That is exactly the goal we want for you, and that is the one partner that can solve the security problems, handles the heavy lifting, and clears the path for your compliance. So I leave you with this. The goal is should not just to pass the audit. Okay, it should be to reach a state where you always are the compliance ready and by design. Okay, for this, if you have any audit coming up, so I have seen the organization where the audits are at in the different time frame. Okay, somebody is doing the ISO audit, suppose in January, and SOC 2 audit is due in June or July, and they have to again collect the evidence, again collect the logs and those things for in January and July. But if you have the 24/7 things already in place, you don't have to worry about those issues, and you will always be compliant and always be having the proof which you can showcase to your auditor. So that's all I had. I'll hand over to Ran. Let's open the floor if we have any question from the audience.
Thanks so much, Brian. I think that was a very comprehensive conversation, and I think we can open up for some Q&A here at the tail end of the conversation. So I'll go ahead and open up that Q&A, and please feel free to throw some more questions in there as we go through this. But first one up here, I think this is going to be one for Brian. So as far as that Arctic Wolf data, it sounds like you guys are collecting a lot of that telemetry. Where is that Arctic Wolf data stored at?
Yeah, so good question. We have a handful of data centers. It largely depends on where you're operating out of. If you have concerns for, say, like GDPR, we have resources within EMEA to host your data to make sure you're not getting any compliance hot water. If there's North American-based things that are more strict, so CMMC would be a good example. They typically want to know that their logs live within North America. All of those things are things we can effectively account for. We do have an international SOC. Largely, let's say if you're working in North America, we have 4 security operations centers in North America that you'd be working with. But if we have folks based out of EMEA, APAC, the Oceanic region, we have international groups to support those as well. But just know from a data residency perspective, we support many customers with compliance, so typically not a challenge for us to find something that works and won't make your auditors upset.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And I think that kind of relays perfectly into this next question, kind of talking about those auditors. So as far as when we are going through those audits with those auditors, typically they may see those CISOs and those auditors, seeing that technology come through. Looks like it's coming through in different languages. How does an MDR service translate, those logs that are coming through to help satisfy those requirements?
Okay. So I'll take this up. So what happens, Brian and Ran? So it shifts the output from your raw logs to the narrative evidence. So earlier, what used to happen, rather than the giving a complete CSV file of 10,000 logs on events to the auditor, with the MDR solution, you are giving a systematic or a documented dispositions or evidence proof. Okay, so it shows that the event was flagged. That is one. It was investigated by a human. Okay, and the conclusion was reached. It is not that it was in the air. Okay, that is second thing. And also, it also bridges the gap between having the data and proving oversight. Okay, which is what actually auditor is looking and care about. So if the auditor is coming and asking about anything which they sometimes they might not understand the technical implication or the language of the event, you can always showcase, since the article is providing the complete detailed dashboard and the report, you can showcase exactly this was the incident which happened, this was the it was how it was logged, how it was investigated, and how we reached to this conclusion, and that gives the complete story to the auditor and satisfy the compliance requirement.
Perfect. Thank you, Om. And then I think one last one we have here in the chat here, beyond just, that general continuous, improvement of that environment, what's the number one aspect of compliance that an MDR service can help solve, in your opinion?
Okay. So what I feel, that one of the most challenging operational requirement which MDR help is the incident response. Okay, and security incident response procedure that mandate, it is required by, I have already spoken on, it's required by HIPAA, SOC 2, ISO 27K, PCI. So the MDR's core function is to provide you 24/7 detection and the guided remediation. Okay, so which automatically generates the meticulous timestamp documentation, your audit trails, and also the reporting which is necessary, and it is consistent in the controlled environment. So, and this is very critical. This is very critical for the adherence to rule, that in case of the breach has happened. So, if the breach has happened, what time the notification came, that is most important. So, generally the timelines, if you see, in the incident response, the timeline is very important. So, you must have seen in the organization where, if there is an incident happening, they have for in the cloud, they obviously they have the recovery time objective and recovery RPO and all those kind of details and the metrics. But the timeline to close that particular incident is also very important, which is always documented in the incident response plan. They always have the incident response team, okay, to immediate take the action if the article or the MDR tool is generating. So adherence to the critical timelines, getting the notification, closing that incident in a timely manner is the most challenging thing, what I feel, when it comes to the MDR service.
Awesome. And I guess just open up to other panelists. Brian, any thoughts on that as far as what would be, the number one thing that an MDR service would help meet as far as those compliance? I know we talked a lot about some of those core compliance frameworks, but just in your opinion, if there's anything you'd like to add in on there as well.
So, yeah, I suppose that incident response is going to be a big piece of it simply because insurance providers are at the end of the day looking to make sure that you are a reputable business that is risk adverse. So by going through, I'll say not even a traditional like incident response scenario. Hopefully an organization doesn't have to do that, but just a tabletop exercise, something like that can effectively be structured with a lot of vendors. It's just making sure you've prepared for the worst day imaginable, and hopefully it never comes to it. But I can say safely after speaking with organizations that have decided to, we'll say, kick the can a little bit on certain security initiatives, not because the IT professional didn't want it, but usually just shut down from a top perspective. They're kicking themselves when they go through an incident saying, well, now we're paying twice as much for something we could have had that would prevent this in the first place. So a full tabletop exercise, I would say, would be a good way just to make sure that if something bad happens, the recovery process is as swift as it can be.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.
Of course.
Well, I do want to thank everyone for joining us here today. I know we talked a lot today as far as, both compliance and Arctic Wolf, but if there are any additional questions about how Accorian can help you map to those compliance frameworks, keep you compliant with those frameworks, and really achieve those outcomes that you're looking to achieve, please feel free to reach out to the Accorian team. We've included their information here. If you'd also like to learn more about the Arctic Wolf platform, our services, and how we can go to market, we are a 100% channel organization, so we do work through our channel partners. So please reach out to the Accorian team if you'd like to learn more about Arctic Wolf and our solutions, and we can definitely set up more time to talk about how we can get you guys set up to meet those compliance frameworks and are continuously compliant with the frameworks that we're looking to achieve and master those outcomes. Thanks everyone for joining here today.